discovered that beautiful fountain with the garden, the terraced gardens, and all of the statues that were around the fountain, and the big concrete things that hold columns that were around the tennis courts, and just so many things. There was a millstone that said, "I was born here." And I said, where did all these things come from? Who put these here? Who selected all the furniture? How did all this come to be? And the docents would tell me a few things, but they didn't really know. And Holly had been there as the chef for several generations, but she didn't really know about the grounds because that was not her interest. She liked to cook. And as I realized that the staff turned over, and so there was nobody to pass on the stories. And so I thought, I will invite the governors and their wives, and I will pick their brains, and I will find out all of this. But lo and behold, they talked about politics and friends in politics and laughed, and I didn't learn anything. And so I talked to Mrs. Sanders just before she left, and I said, didn't you work on the committee that planned this mansion? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I really wanted to learn about the mansion. And she said, well, just call me sometime. Bad thing to say to me. We did the next week. And we went over to visit with her. And we visited more than once. And then, to find out more, she suggested, I think, Kitty Farnham, because Kitty Farnham had helped catalog the pieces of furniture. And we also went to the archives, just trying to find out things, because I was a curious 6th grade school teacher, and I wanted to know how things happened. And so it was through that we began to talk about it. I would go back and tell the docents, and they said, you need to write this down. And we talked about it, and it was Jamil. I can't say his last name, Zeraldin, who encouraged us to go ahead and do something. And he called a meeting to try to encourage it. And then, through the help of several other people, Henry Turner and others, Henry helped to give us some money to get us started so we wouldn't quit. And we began to work on this. And it was then that after we tried several things, and finally I said, I guess I'm going to have to write it myself. And my assistant said, you can't do that. You correct every paragraph. And that was when we sought out some help. And what great help we found with Jennifer and Catherine. And so we are so grateful. There were so many people who played a part in this, and we're grateful to the families who have been so cooperative, to the people who have worked there, to the docents who were interviewed, the people in the community who have helped us. Several people helped us financially, Coca-Cola and Aflac and others. And we are so grateful to them because they made this book possible. And I am not a writer, but I would have loved being included on this book because they took my idea and ran with it. And it's well documented, and it can be used for research as well as pleasure. And I hope all of you will love it as much as I do, and I hope you will buy lots of books so that you can give them as Christmas presents. Oh, and I forgot one important thing. When you buy them at the mansion, the money goes to Friends of the Mansion. Any kind of profits we make go to Friends of the Mansion. And that is the fund that we use to repair things at the mansion, because otherwise we have to raise private monies. And so this is a way that we can have a fund to repair things, the furniture and things. And I must tell you, before I stop, and I know it's past my time, Mrs. Perdue could not be here tonight, and she sent a nice note saying that she said, I regret having to write this note to say we'll not be able to attend. And she said, I've tried to find a way to be with you for this special event, and I'm sorry to say I cannot. But you must know that she raised an enormous amount of money, and she is the one who led in recovering all the furniture on the main level and much of the work done upstairs. We also had help to finish out some of the things while I was there. And so we think it's a beautiful place, and we're so proud, and we know you are too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wood. The main event. As you can see, we've seated our panel in chronological order by their administration. And of course, we're going to begin with Betty Foy Sanders, who has the legacy of working to bring the mansion to fruition and never had a chance to live there. We'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like to be in the Granite Mansion and a little bit about what it was like to bring the mansion to the people of Georgia.
Thank you so much. They asked me to speak about living in the old home. Okay. I'm the only one at this table that had that opportunity. It was very frustrating, but quite an honor to move into that big stone house. I flew up with Carl from Augusta. It got to be mid-October. And I had never been in anything but the main living room downstairs. So I called Betty Vandiver, and I asked if I could come up, and she would show me the house. So we went up, and it was close to lunchtime, so we sat down to have some lunch. And in came a houseman and said, "Pardon me, Miss Vandiver, but I got a problem." And she said, "What?" He said, "It's leaking real bad upstairs." She said, "Go get the buckets." That was my first shock. We went from there on to the rest of the house. And by the way, this has happened to me twice in 2 weeks. The introductories here took my speech. And I was in Statesboro 2 weeks ago, and the mayor and Sandra said everything before it got time for me to speak. So I'm going to tell y'all anyway that we went in the dining room and we said, "Okay, do we have any table linens?" No. "Do we have a full set of china?" No. "Do we have a whole set of silverware?" No. It had Governor's Mansion engraved on it, so where do you think it went? Called souvenirs. So anyway, I thought, oh goodness, am I supposed to entertain the state and our citizens in this kind of situation? I was just 36 years old, so rather wet behind the ears, even though we had been around the political arena for 10 years. Carl had been in the legislature, and then he was in the Senate. He was the floor leader in the Senate, and then he was president of the Senate. So we knew how the ball bounced in politics, and so when he ran for governor and won wholeheartedly over Marvin Griffin, then I saw what was ahead for me. I walked around the house. There wasn't nothing interesting in it, an old piano in one room. And a wonderful painting, the most valuable thing as far as I'm concerned, over the mantel, of Wilbur Kurtz's work, who was one of our outstanding artists, and I respect the work he did so much, and we are lucky to have had it. But after we moved in, Ms. Kurtz called and said, "Governor, nobody paid my husband for that." And I'm not going to mention what governor that went back to. He said, "Ms. Kurtz, you will have your money tomorrow." So anyway, that's kind of the circumstance of which I was fixing to bring a fourth and a fifth grader up to live on that high hill. And Ansley Park was a settled neighborhood with older, established families. There weren't many young children out there. But the mansion held a very high spot in Atlanta, 3 acres, and sits way up. And I thought, goodness gracious, my children are going to leave their buddies, their friends, their scout this, their that, to go live in that big stone house. And they didn't have nothing to do but aggravate the troopers. We had 6. I'm not going to ask the government deal how many they got. And then Carl had a driver and we had a driver. And that was it. And other than a little chihuahua that lived in the basement and a stray German shepherd that wandered up that nobody wanted, that was it. So anyway, it came about under the Vandiver administration that a new mansion had been talked about, but it didn't get off the ground. In the meantime, Carl was elected governor. J.B. Fuqua had come up and was in the Senate, that Carl encouraged him to get into government. Joe Frank, wait just a minute, the Speaker, George T. Smith,